I remember the first time she looked at me, not the polite kind of glance you give a stranger, but the kind that lingers a second too long. It was enough to make the air shift. She was standing by the window of the cafe, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup, eyes fixed on the rain outside. Mid-40s, maybe? Graceful in that quiet, effortless way that only someone who's lived a little can be. Her hair was slightly undone, like she hadn't meant to impress anyone, but somehow, that made her impossible to look away from. I told myself to stop staring. But then she looked back. The moment should have ended there, a shared glance between two strangers. But she smiled, small, restrained, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. "Do you come here often?" she asked, her voice low, carrying something between curiosity and caution. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly when I need to think." She tilted her head, studying me with that soft, assessing look people use when they're trying to decide whether to open a door or keep it shut. "You look like someone who thinks too much." Maybe I did. Maybe that's why I noticed the small things, how her hand trembled slightly when she reached for her cup, how her eyes softened when she caught herself smiling, how her laugh came out quiet, almost as if she was out of practice. I wanted to ask her name, but she beat me to it. "I'm Claire," she said, offering her hand. Her fingers were warm, delicate, a little unsure. Mine stayed a moment too long around hers before I let go. I told her my name, and she repeated it under her breath, softly, as if tasting it, testing how it felt in her mouth. We talked about nothing for a while. The kind of small talk that hides more than it reveals. Favorite coffee, old songs, the way the weather ruins plans. But every word carried something unsaid beneath it. Every silence filled with the weight of what either of us would admit. When I laughed, she watched me like she wasn't supposed to. When she spoke, I listened too closely. There was something about her that made the world quieter. At one point, our hands brushed again. I don't know if it was on purpose, maybe it was. The touch was light, barely there, but it sent something electric through me. She didn't pull away immediately, she just looked down at our hands, then back at me, as if deciding whether to pretend it hadn't happened. "You're too young," she said suddenly. Not unkindly. Just a statement of fact. "Maybe," I said. "But you're still here." She exhaled, a sound halfway between a sigh and a laugh, then leaned back, crossing her arms. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might start believing them." The rain outside had turned heavier. The windows blurred with streaks of water. Inside, everything felt still, except for the pulse in my chest and the way her gaze kept finding me again. The cafe around us faded into background noise, cups clinking, low murmurs, the hum of the espresso machine. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, something subtle and warm, like sandalwood and late nights. She looked away, pretending to check her phone. "You should go," she said quietly. I didn't move. "Do you want me to?" Her lips parted, then closed again. A pause stretched between us, heavy, dangerous. Then the door opened behind me. Someone called her name, a man's voice. Her eyes flicked to the sound, then back to me. "You should really go," she whispered. But neither of us did. Not yet. I saw her again 2 days later. Same cafe, same window seat, same untouched cup of coffee growing colder by the minute. She looked up when I walked in, just a flicker of recognition, but enough to stop me mid-step. I pretended I hadn't seen her, ordered my drink, and chose the table beside hers. Close enough to feel her presence, far enough to pretend it didn't matter. "You again," she said finally, that faint smile returning. "You must really like the rain. Or maybe I just like the company." She gave me a look, half amusement, half warning. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I know," I said. "You told me." Her fingers toyed with the spoon, tracing circles in the steam rising from her cup. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. "Someone good?" Her eyes softened. "Someone I used to know. Someone who used to look at me like you do now." I didn't ask what happened to him. I didn't need to. The pause after her words told me everything: loss, distance, a story she'd buried under years of composure. She changed the subject quickly, asking about school, work, anything that wasn't us. I answered, but she wasn't really listening. Her eyes drifted unfocused, like she was somewhere else entirely. When she finally looked back, something in her expression had shifted. "You shouldn't waste your time on people who already have too much history," she said. I leaned in, just slightly. "Maybe I like history." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "You're too young to understand what it costs." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was charged, like the moment before a storm. Her hand rested on the table, fingers brushing the edge of her cup. Without thinking, I reached across and touched them. She didn't pull away. Not right away. Just a soft intake of breath, her pulse visible at her wrist. "Don't," she whispered, though her hand didn't move. "Why?" "Because it's easier if you don't." Her voice trembled slightly, not fear, not rejection, just exhaustion. Like someone who'd spent years holding walls up that were finally beginning to crack. For a moment, we just sat there, my thumb resting lightly against her skin, her eyes fixed on the place where our hands met. The sound of rain blurred everything else. When she finally withdrew her hand, she did it slowly, like the movement itself hurt. "I was married once," she said, almost to herself. 15 years. He left. I never asked him why. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady now, almost defiant. "That's why I don't do this." "Do what?" "Feel something I shouldn't." Her breath brushed against my cheek when she said it. She hadn't realized how close we'd become, either had I. For a moment neither of us moved. Then, softly, she said, "You should go before I forget what's right." I didn't. And when her hand brushed mine again, either of us pretended it was an accident. It had been a week since I last saw her. I told myself I was fine, that it was better this way. But I still found myself walking past the cafe every day, hoping she'd be there. And one evening she was. She sat alone near the back, the late sunlight spilling across her face. She looked different, tired maybe, or softer, like she'd stopped pretending not to care. When she saw me, she didn't smile this time. Just nodded, as if she'd been expecting me. "I thought you said I shouldn't waste my time," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I did," she murmured. "And you didn't listen." "I never do." A small laugh escaped her, brief but real. "Your trouble," she said. "You don't even realize it." The space between us felt thinner than it should have. Every word, every pause carried a pulse beneath it. I noticed the faint tremor in her hand when she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her sleeve slipped slightly, revealing the curve of her wrist. She caught me looking. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "I can't help it." Before she could reply, a voice called her name from across the cafe. A woman, older, familiar, maybe a friend. Claire froze. "Stay still," she muttered under her breath. The woman approached, smiling, holding a takeaway cup. "Claire! I didn't expect to see you here." Claire's composure returned instantly. She smiled, light and casual. "Just grabbing something before heading home." Her friend's eyes flicked toward me. "And who's this?" I opened my mouth, but Claire spoke first. "Just someone I know from the gallery." The lie was small, clean, and practiced. Still, the tremor in her voice gave it away. The woman smiled politely, then excused herself. But even after she left, the air between us stayed tight, trembling. Claire exhaled, looking down at her hands. "She's going to ask questions," she said softly. "And I won't know how to answer them." "Then don't." Her eyes lifted to mine. Something flickered there, equal parts fear and longing. "You don't understand what this looks like," she said. "What people will say. Then don't let them see." She shook her head, but didn't move away when I reached out. My hand brushed hers, warm, familiar now. She looked down, then up again, caught between instinct and want. Every time you do that, she whispered, it gets harder to stop. Then stop me. She didn't. The cafe had grown quieter. Dusk pressed against the windows. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled, low and distant. Her eyes softened, her breath catching slightly. I leaned closer, and for a moment, everything narrowed, her scent, her pulse, the faint tremble of her lip as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Her hand came up, fingertips resting against my jaw, tentative, hesitant, but there. Then her phone buzzed on the table. The sound sliced through the moment. She flinched, pulling her hand back. The screen lit up, a name she didn't want me to see. I have to go, she said quickly, standing, collecting her bag. Claire. She looked at me, eyes glassy with something she didn't name. Don't make this harder. And then, just before she turned away, she whispered, You shouldn't look at me like that. But I already was. And she already knew I hadn't meant to look for her again. Yet here I was, pushing through the cafe door, hoping for the same table, the same quiet miracle. She was there, head bent over a notebook, hair falling loose across her cheek. When she looked up, something in her eyes said you again without a word. I sat down before either of us could change our minds. You came back, she said. You left me mid-sentence, I answered. That made her smile. It broke the stillness between us. The talk was light at first, books, her work at the gallery, the weather turning too cold for June, but each pause hung a little longer than the last. My knee brushed hers beneath the table, either of us moved it away. Her perfume, clean, faintly floral, seemed to fill the small space between us. Then a bell jingled. Claire? A voice, female, warm, familiar. A friend. I felt her body stiffen beside me. Stay still, she murmured. The woman walked over, coffee in hand. I didn't know you were meeting someone. Just an intern from the gallery, Claire said quickly. We were going over a proposal. Her lie sat between us like static. The woman smiled, chatted briefly, then left. But Claire's pulse still fluttered at her throat. She'll ask questions, she said. Then tell her the truth. I can't. Because of me? Because of me, she whispered. Because I'm supposed to know better. Outside, rain started again, thin and silvery against the glass. I reached across and touched her wrist. The gesture was small, reckless. Her eyes closed for a heartbeat before she pulled in a shaky breath. Every time you do that, she said, I forget why this is wrong. Then forget. Her hand slipped free, but she didn't move away. We sat like that, two people pretending not to be cornered by what they wanted. The lights dimmed as clouds rolled over the sun. A hush spread through the cafe, broken only by the faint clatter of dishes and the uneven rhythm of our breathing. She turned toward me. Her lips parted as if to speak, and my body moved before my mind caught up. The distance between us vanished until I could feel her breath against my mouth, coffee, rain, the faintest tremor of hesitation. And then her phone vibrated sharply on the table. The sound cracked the spell. She flinched, grabbed the phone, glanced at the screen. Whatever name she saw drained the color from her face. I have to go, she said. Claire. She looked at me then, eyes wide, full of everything we hadn't said. Don't, she breathed. If you keep looking at me like that, I won't be able to walk away. But she did, one step, then another, until the bell above the door rang again and she was gone. I sat there, rain pressing harder against the glass, the warmth of her still on my skin. After that night at the cafe, she disappeared. No calls, no messages, not even a passing glimpse through the window she used to sit beside. I told myself to let it go, that whatever we'd almost started was never meant to last. But then, one evening, she showed up at my door. She didn't knock right away. I heard her outside, the faint shuffle of her shoes, a long pause. When I finally opened it, she looked startled, like she hadn't really expected me to answer. Claire, I said, her name coming out quieter than I meant. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. Then why are you? She didn't answer. Her eyes were red, tired. The same careful woman I knew, but frayed at the edges, the mask gone. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her coat still damp from the rain. The air between us felt heavy, familiar, dangerous. I need to tell you something, she said finally. I nodded. Go ahead. She hesitated, wringing her hands. The man who called me that night, the one on the phone. Her voice faltered. He wasn't just a friend. He's my ex-husband. I stared at her. He wants to come back, she said, almost to herself. He says he's changed. That we could fix things. The words landed like stones between us. I waited for her to say she wanted that, to make it make sense, to make leaving easier. But she didn't. Instead, she looked up at me with trembling hands, eyes that couldn't lie. I told him no, she whispered. And I didn't know why until now. Something inside me snapped and softened all at once. You shouldn't. I started, but she cut me off. I tried not to think about you, she said, stepping closer. I tried so hard. Her voice cracked, and before I could move, she was inches away, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off her skin, smelled the faint trace of rain in her hair. I told myself it was just loneliness, she continued. That it was nothing. But it wasn't. Her hand brushed against my chest, then froze there, as if realizing how far she'd gone. You make me feel something I thought I'd lost. I could barely breathe. Claire, I said, her name breaking in my throat. You don't have to explain. But she shook her head, eyes bright with something between defiance and fear. You need to understand what this costs me, she said. If anyone finds out, I don't care, I said. She laughed, soft, broken, unbelieving. You should. A silence stretched between us, thick enough to touch. Then, suddenly, she stepped back, as if burned by her own confession. Her hands trembled when she tried to fix her coat. I shouldn't have come, she whispered, voice trembling. But I had to see you once more, to know if it was real. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away this time. It's real, I said. Her eyes met mine, scared, wanting, certain. And then, barely above a whisper, she said, Then don't let me go this time. The rain outside turned harder, almost frantic, as if echoing the decision neither of us could take back. The storm outside hadn't stopped all night. Rain clung to the windows, wind pressed against the walls, and every sound seemed to echo the pulse between us. She stood by the door, coat half on, torn between leaving and not being able to. I could see it in her, the battle that had been raging for weeks. You should go, I said quietly. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Is that what you want? It wasn't. But the truth caught in my throat, heavy and useless. She turned, her hand on the doorknob, and I saw her shoulders tremble, just enough to undo me. Claire, I whispered. She froze. I stepped closer slowly, until there was barely an inch of space between us. The air changed, warmer, thinner. Her breath hitched when I said her name again, softer this time. You can't keep doing this, she said, voice shaking. You can't look at me like you know me. I do. Her eyes flicked to mine, desperate, searching. You don't know what I've given up already. Then tell me, I said. Tell me to stop. She didn't. The silence between us was alive, every second stretching, pulling, daring one of us to break it. I could see her fighting it, her jaw tightening, her hands trembling at her sides. When I reached out, my fingers barely brushed her wrist, but it was enough. She exhaled, a shuddering sound, and turned to face me fully. You make me feel stupid, she said, her voice trembling. Like I'm 19 again and everything's impossible. I smiled faintly. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Her lips parted, a quiet breath escaping. It is when you've spent half your life pretending not to need anyone. I stepped closer still, until our foreheads nearly touched. Her scent, warm, clean, familiar, filled the space between us. I could feel the tremor in her chest, the uneven rhythm of her breathing. Then stop pretending, I whispered. For a long second, she didn't move. Her eyes were glassy, her hands caught between wanting and restraint. Then she closed the distance. Not a kiss, not yet, just the smallest brush of her nose against mine, her breath trembling against my lips. It was enough to make the world fall away. I'm scared, she said. So am I. Her eyes softened, and I knew then that whatever we were, wrong, impossible, temporary, it was real. Her hand came up to my face, thumb brushing my cheek. If we do this, everything changes, she whispered. I nodded. It already has. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved, suspended between choice and consequence. Then she leaned in, closing that final inch of space, and the moment became quiet, inevitable. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. But it was honest. When she finally pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. Now you know, she whispered. And I did. Completely. The storm had passed, leaving the streets slick and shining, the air clean enough to feel new. Claire sat by the window of my apartment, a mug of coffee warming her hands. The early light touched her face, soft, unguarded, the kind of calm that comes after too many restless nights. Neither of us had said much since dawn. Words felt too fragile for what hung between us. You're quiet, I said finally. She smiled faintly without turning. I'm thinking. About what? About how strange it feels to not be running from something. I moved closer, leaning against the counter beside her. You don't have to anymore. She looked at me then, the kind of look that felt like a question and an answer all at once. You make it sound easy. It doesn't have to be easy, I said. Just real. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she set her cup down and reached for my hand. The movement was slow, deliberate, like she wanted to be sure I wouldn't pull away. Her fingers slid between mine, warm, steady, familiar now. I used to think this kind of thing was for other people, she said quietly. You know, second chances, beginning again. And now? She smiled. Now I think maybe it was waiting for me to stop being afraid. I squeezed her hand gently. And are you? She hesitated. Almost. Her honesty hit deeper than any confession could have. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't dramatic, it was real, the kind of truth that lives in quiet mornings after storms. We stood there in the light, her thumb tracing circles against my palm. I wanted to say something, to promise her forever, to make sense of the impossible way she made me feel, but instead I just leaned closer until our foreheads touched. Her breath caught. She closed her eyes, and in that stillness, I could feel every unspoken word between us. I don't care about what people think, I murmured. Her eyes opened slowly, a small laugh catching in her throat. You will one day. Maybe. But not today. She shook her head, amused and undone at once. Then, without another word, she rested her head against my shoulder. The weight of her felt like the most natural thing in the world. We didn't need to define it. We didn't need to make promises. The silence between us wasn't the careful kind anymore, it was peace. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Sunlight spilled across the floor, touching everything it could reach. She looked up at me, eyes soft, voice barely above a whisper. So, what happens now? I smiled. Whatever we're brave enough to let. Her laugh was quiet, a sound that finally sounded like freedom. And for the first time, either of us looked away.